I was saying, y'all, it's your boy Rico from RicoScores, and as you can see, this is my final predictive Washington Commander 7-round mock draft, based primarily on confirmed interest from reports from people close to the organization, top 30 prospect visits, all of that type of stuff. Now, just to let you know, I was supposed to come out with this even earlier in the morning or even like late last night. I tried to take a nap and I guess I was exhausted because I woke up and it was like 6 a.m. and I've been still working on this mock draft until then. I'm now just recording as of 9 a.m. I'm sorry that it's coming out so late. Also, I don't know if you've seen it, but my mom put together this shirt. We're in professional draft mode now. We got the collar on, looking like a real analyst out here. We even got the draft goat right here on the shirt. You know what I'm saying? We're not playing with y'all, and I'm wearing this shirt for at least the next week or two on and off, because we gotta get to this draft stuff, and we're gonna kick it off with this final predictive mock draft. But before we dive into all of this, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you follow all of the social medias: TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of them, because I put content on there that I don't even put on the YouTube page. So make sure you follow us everywhere, and of course I got y'all covered. Everything Commanders, but also specifically everything draft wise. I'm gonna break down every single draft pick that we draft in this upcoming draft, and then I'm even gonna do film sessions later on down the line leading up to training camp on each player that we draft. So expect at least 2 videos minimum for each player that we bring in. But say like a quarterback like Jayden Daniels, we bring him in, I'll probably do multiple film sessions on him, because I'll try to show how he can fit in Cliff Kingsbury offense this way, or what are his best traits, or we could do like a weakness film session looking at what he's bad at and how we can potentially fix that at the NFL level. So at minimum, you're getting 2 videos for each player that we draft, and even maybe some highly notable undrafted free agents. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And I, of course, will be live streaming the entire draft for the Washington Commanders, at least rounds 1 through 5. So today, Thursday, draft starts at 8. I'm live streaming at 7, and we're going all the way through the first round. Same thing with rounds 2 and 3, and at least rounds 4 and 5 on Saturday. So make sure you pull off all of that. But instead of wasting more of y'all time, let's get it. Adam. Now, of course, this is my predictive mock draft. Yesterday, like kind of technically 2 nights ago, whatever you want to call it, I did my final what I want the Washington Commanders to do draft. This one is what I think the Commanders will do, not necessarily what I think they should do. This is my final predictive mock draft. I'm gonna give y'all comps for a lot of these players, well, really all of the players one way or another. I'm giving you weaknesses and strengths. We're talking about athletic profile and also how they fit on the team. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to it. Round 1, second overall, I was taking quarterback Jayden Daniels from LSU. And also, I want to note that I do predict us to make some draft moves. That's why I included that in the what I want to do version of my mock draft. But this predictive one is really hard to try to guess exactly where we're going to trade to, whether trading up for a tackle, trading back to get some more picks in the middle, late rounds. Who knows? So I kind of avoided that just to play it safe here. I'm more so just trying to get the prospects right, not necessarily where we get the players, but which players we get. And again, moving on, even though I do lean slightly towards Jayden Daniels over Drake Maye, I'd be very happy with either one, but all of the smoke right now is pointing towards Jayden Daniels being the pick. Again, I already know I selected in my mock draft that I did yesterday morning / 2 nights ago in what I want the Commanders to do for 7 rounds. So I really wanted to come in here and try and pick somebody else in this mock draft that I was going to do the very next day to at least make this mock draft just a little bit more interesting. But again, from everything I'm hearing and seeing, it's really looking like that it's going to be Jayden Daniels as the pick right now. If it's not, most people will be very shocked about it. So in my final predictive mock draft, I feel like I have to really just pick Jayden's at this point. And I already talked about him so much, not only in my last mock draft that I just did yesterday morning, but also in all of the other videos that I've done breakdowns on him. And I even did a video specifically on like Jayden Daniels versus Drake May, who's specifically better at what. It was like a 30-40 minute video of that. So if you really want my thoughts on Jayden Daniels, go check out all of those videos. But for now, we're just going to keep it relatively short. And again, like I already told you, if we end up selecting Jayden Daniels, I'm going to talk about him a lot more after that pick, and especially when I start to do film sessions on him as well. But best believe, if we do end up taking him second overall, you're going to get a lot of videos on Jayden Daniels. So I'm going to keep it really brief and quick here. If you want to know my thoughts on him right now, though, again, I have a lot of different videos talking about Jayden Daniels for the past couple of months, so go check those out. So just know that the reason that I'm leaning towards him, though, is that I think he's talented enough to lead us to Super Bowls eventually, and that he would be a great pick for us in general. Again, I like both top two quarterbacks between Jayden Daniels and Drake May. I'm not as big of a JJ McCarthy fan, and I feel like Jayden Daniels or Drake May could lead us to Super Bowls eventually. I feel like Jayden Daniels does give you a better opportunity to win right now, though. And then his comp, to me, I've seen comps all over the place, but I feel like he's literally a faster, better deep ball throwing, and better going through his progressions version of college Jalen Hurts. Like literally just a higher floor and a higher ceiling Oklahoma version of Jalen Hurts coming out of college, in my personal opinion. Now moving on, round 2, 36th overall, I have us taking offensive tackle Jordan Morgan out of Arizona. And even though I was very close to taking Chop Robinson here, because he came in for top 30 visits, I still feel like we have a need for a high ceiling edge rusher. And the main thing is that I just necessarily don't feel like he's even going to make it this far in the draft. And also, I'm really hoping that they find a way to trade up for my dog, Amarius Mims, the offensive tackle from Georgia, or Penn State tackle, Olu Fashanu, but you'll have to trade up even further to get him than Amarius Mims. But I said, you know what? In my predictive mock draft, I'm going to play it safe and select Jordan Morgan, even though he's not even one of my top 5 offensive tackles in this class. Because first of all, Tony Pauline reported recently that there is literally no way that Jordan Morgan makes it past the Commanders with the 36th pick, if he even makes it that far in the first place. And second of all, Jordan Morgan was one of the 9 tackles we brought in for top 30 visits, and one of the only few that even has a little bit of first round draft buzz. So there is serious interest in him from the Commander side. And again, I already did a video breakdown on this a couple of weeks ago, but I did a deep dive into how often Adam Peters has drafted players from top 30 visits that the 49ers had. And it's a very high rate, especially compared to other NFL teams, like way higher than most other NFL teams. He also loves to take Senior Bowl players as well. I did a dive into that, and it basically ran down a list of all of the Senior Bowl players that the 49ers have drafted over the past few years. And Jordan Morgan fits both of those, Senior Bowl player and top 30 visit player. And history shows that Adam Peters loves to draft from both. So again, if Jordan Morgan is available 36th overall, we're for sure taking him. I would bet money on that if that scenario were to happen. I wouldn't even be surprised if we trade up slightly towards like the very end of the first round to get a Jordan Morgan so we can get that 5th-year contract. So no matter where we end up picking after we take quarterback second overall, I think it's quite likely that Jordan Morgan will be our very next pick. I'm very sure it's going to be a tackle, but I also think that Jordan Morgan is probably the most likely, just because we wouldn't have to trade up as far to get him versus an Amarius Mims or Olu Fashanu or a JC Latham or one of those guys. Whether it's in the first round, late first, mid first, or early second, I can definitely see him being the guy that we end up taking after we potentially take Jayden Daniels second overall. Now on to him as a prospect. First of all, Jordan Morgan is very athletic with a high ceiling, and you can develop him potentially into a great tackle. He has a 9 out of 10 raw athletic score, which makes him the 133rd most athletic tackle to enter the NFL through the draft since 1987. That's really good, y'all. He has good explosion according to the chart, with a great broad jump of 9 feet 2 inches, and his hands are 10 7/8 inches, which is pretty big as well. But he does have short arms though. We got to emphasize that, and he's pretty raw. But if you really want to get an idea of how great he could potentially be, watch his tape against arguably the best edge rusher in this entire draft class in Laiatu Latu. He did a very good job against him. Got beat a couple of times, but overall did a great job throughout the game, and I would definitely say that he won that matchup. And it reminds me of basically how Darnell Wright had that same positive in his corner going into his draft last year. Toolsy guy, and when in doubt, had a great game against Alabama's great edge rusher in Will Anderson to really bank on, and that's pretty much how Jordan Morgan can use his tape against Latu. Basically just like, forget everything else, go watch how I blocked against him, and then you have a great idea of what I could eventually be. So when in doubt, you know that he can step up and do a great job against the great edge rushers in the NFL potentially. He may be raw, he may be inconsistent, but when in doubt, you see the flashes and potential, and maybe the right coaching staff can draft him and teach him to be just more consistent. That's really all you have to do. And his comp, to me, is more of like a goal ceiling comp than like a realistic one. I feel like this is somewhat of a reach, but I can see him being a more mobile and overall far more athletic version of Mitchell Schwartz. Both have very short arms, which is why I did this comp. And that mainly, I'm doing that comp as well to show you that there is a pathway for Jordan Morgan to potentially be a great tackle, even with very short arms. But again, Jordan Morgan is more athletic, so a higher ceiling, more explosive, and way faster and more mobile. So as far as like having the pull as a tackle, getting to the second level to block linebackers and corners, I like his potential there a lot. The short arms are going to make most people see him as a guard, though. You're going to see a lot of talk about Jordan Morgan being a guard at the next level. But again, Mitchell Schwartz has shown you that you can be an elite tackle with short arms. Again, like I've been saying in multiple videos and live streams, I would far more prefer to trade up for Amarius Mims or Olu Fashanu, but I can see a path where Jordan Morgan ends up being really good as well. There's just less paths to it, in my opinion, compared to those other guys. Or maybe I can see the Commanders even taking a shot at Brandon Coleman out of TCU with his ridiculous athletic profile later in the draft instead of in the second round like Jordan Morgan. Now moving on, round 2, 40th overall, I was taking wide receiver Roman Wilson from Michigan. Now I really want a big receiver like an A.D. Mitchell or Xavier Legette or maybe like a Malachi Corley, but my dog Ken Johansen at Burgundy Border reported and tweeted, quote, according to a pair of sources, the Commanders have significant interest in Michigan wide receiver Roman Wilson, unquote. And even though we didn't bring him in for a top 30 visit like most of these guys I have us taking in this mock draft, maybe that's because they didn't want to show their cards with their visits, which is very easily accessible information that all other NFL teams could easily gather if they want to. So maybe they tried to hide their interest in them by not bringing them in for a top 30 visit. They already knew everything they needed to know from going to the pro day, meeting them at the combine and things like that. And assuming that this interest is real, then I can see a lot of positives in his game that he could bring to the Commanders. First of all, even though I feel like we specifically need a big and tall receiver again, we still need just more receivers in general. Like, I would personally wait until like the 3rd round to get one of the best receivers left on the board, in my personal opinion. But I can see why the Commanders will really like him and not risk waiting to see if he falls to the 3rd round, because some people even believe he may go somewhere late in the 1st. First of all, he's very underrated. It's actually crazy to me. And like I've mentioned before in my mock draft from yesterday morning when I selected linebacker Junior Coulson from the same team, Michigan, if JJ McCarthy was truly carried to a college championship ring, then why aren't more people from that team hyped up way more than what they are right now? Like, supposedly if JJ McCarthy got carried so bad and he barely had to do anything, then why aren't we talking about guys like Junior Coulson and Roman Wilson even more than we already are right now? If that team was just that great, why aren't any of these prospects outside of JJ McCarthy even getting really any 1st round projection love right now? And secondly, he's probably the best blocking wide receiver in this entire draft class. And he runs a 4.39 40 time and had a 4.07 shuttle and a 1.52 10 yard. So he's very fast, very quick, and very explosive. And he's also a really good route runner and has great hands with a much larger catch radius than a typical 5'11 receiver typically has. But the thing that makes him really stand out the most is his perimeter blocking, man. And with us already having a pretty good blocking receiving group led by Terry McLaurin's blocking, adding Roman Wilson to that would make our offense really unfair. Because think about it. With Jayden Daniels scrambling and Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler running the ball, that extra block from a receiver on the outside is usually the difference between a 5 to 10 yard run and a 30-yard plus run. I see the vision, Adam Peters, I really am. And speaking of seeing the vision, he would be the perfect receiver match for Jayden Daniels. He is a slot receiver that excels in making plays down the field. And which quarterback is the best at throwing the slot fade specifically out of any quarterback in this entire draft class? Jayden Daniels. They will be a match made in heaven for each other with that route specifically. It would literally be unguardable. And sticking with Jayden Daniels, with his scrambling and mobility, Jayden Daniels would also love Roman Wilson because he is an elite scramble drill receiver. It seemed like every time JJ McCarthy had to scramble, Roman Wilson was wide open, very dependable for him. And it doesn't just stop there as far as fits go, because he can also really excel being a part of a lot of mesh concepts and routes. So that's literally the soul of the air raid offense that Cliff Kingsbury wants to run here. And then lastly, of course, what would it hurt to add another 4-3 guy in your receiver room, sub 4-4 guy? Like, how could that hurt? Now, as his comp goes, I feel like as a very realistic comp, even though this is a tough guy to comp because I feel like he's a pretty unique player, because he's not as agile as a typical slot receiver, but he's also faster and way better down the field than a typical slot receiver. He's really a mold breaker, but I came to the decision that he's basically a faster and more explosive KJ Osborne. And before we move on, just a couple of stats. 78% of Roman Wilson's catches resulted in first down. That is ridiculous, y'all. That is super elite. That is insane. Most of the top receivers in this draft are somewhere in like the 50 percentages. 78%. And also, he only dropped 2% of his passes. That's all you need to know about him. Now moving on, round 3, 67th overall, I was taking linebacker Junior Coulson from Michigan. Now, first of all, as expected, like I've already told y'all several videos for the past couple of months, the Commanders were not going to pick up Jamin Davis's 5th-year option. So we do need to start thinking about the future as that goes. Now, I do hope and believe that Jamin Davis in this new role that Dan Quinn has planned for him, that he can excel, and we're going to end up wanting to sign him to a long-term contract. Not an expensive one, but I can see Jamin Davis sticking around long-term. But as of right now, we don't know his future outside of this 2024 season. But either way, moving on now, going to Junior Coulson. And you already know, Peyton Wilson is my personal linebacker 1. But Junior Coulson is right behind him at 2. And he's just a perfect fit for what we need and what this defense schematically is trying to do. Also, even though he didn't come in for a top 30 visit, the Commanders did meet with him at the Combine and went to Michigan's Pro Day, but maybe that was for Roman Wilson, maybe it was for both. But either way, if y'all have been watching my videos for the past few weeks, y'all already know how much I love Junior Coulson and his fit on this defense, man. His coverage will be a very valuable asset for this defense day one. And with his strength, length, and size at 6'2", 238 pounds, he can easily be taught how to do a better job at stacking and shedding offensive linemen when trying to stop the run and things like that. And then he already comes in with great instincts as well. Great IQ, high awareness, all of that type of stuff. And that's why he fits what we need really well right now. Both in year 1 rookie season as a coverage guy, and then year 2 after Bobby Wagner likely leaves as our true middle to defense, quarterback of the defense, Mike linebacker type of guy. But year 1 rookie season wise, he makes our linebacker group immediately better. Like, Jamin will probably rush the passer from the edge in a Micah Parsons like role, which is why I think he'll excel there, and we'll end up signing him long term, but somewhere cheap. Frankie Louvu will probably rush the passer a lot from up the middle and also stop the run primarily while covering just a little bit. And then Bobby Wagner is currently your quarterback of the defense and your true middle linebacker run stopper, who will have to rely on his high instincts and high IQ to allow him to cover a little bit. But Junior Coulson comes in and could immediately be our linebackers group best coverage linebacker in his rookie season. Maybe not week 1, but I'm confident in year 1, by the end of it, he will be our best coverage linebacker. And his comp, well, remember, a guy that Adam Peters drafted to the 49ers. So I feel like this is a perfect match, and he'll probably want his own version of this guy for his now Commanders that he is the general manager for. I literally see Junior Coulson as a Dre Greenlaw. And then round 3, 78th overall, I was taking cornerback Cam Hart out of Notre Dame. Yet another top 30 visitor. And not only that, but also a Senior Bowl meeting, an NFL Combine meeting, and the Commanders went to his pro day. And assuming we're out of the range of Joe Alt, I'm very sure that they went to that Notre Dame pro day for both Cam Hart and tackle Blake Fisher. I'm assuming 2 of those guys. You may even be able to throw in the edge rusher Javonte Jean-Baptiste. Maybe they went there to go look at him. But if I had to put money on any of those guys that they probably went there to watch the most, that they probably are the most interested in, I would put my money on Cam Hart. And let's just go ahead and get it out the way. This guy has crazy potential. He made Marvin Harrison Jr. have one of the worst games he's ever had in college. He held Marvin Harrison Jr. to 3 catches, 39 yards. If you can do that, sign me up. We can nitpick his weaknesses and strengths all we want, and we're going to get to that soon. But when you have the ability to take Marvin Harrison Jr. out of a game, there's clearly some high-end potential right there. It's really simple for a corner. Can you guard the other team's best receiver? And if the answer is yes, I'm sold. But let's go ahead and dive into his traits. First of all, the first thing that you notice immediately is that he's 6'3", 202 pounds. That's really long. He has a lot of similarities to the corner that excelled in that Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. defense last year for the Cowboys, Stephon Gilmore. The reason that Deron Bland was able to go interception hunting like he did was because Stephon was usually covering the other team's either best receiver or at the very least the team's biggest receiver with his length. And if Cam Hart can use his length in the same way, that would allow Emmanuel Forbes to do what he did best in college, and that's hunt interceptions like Deron Bland just did for Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. last year. Just remember, there was a reason that Emmanuel Forbes went in the first round and Deron Bland went in the 5th round. So I'm not saying that Emmanuel Forbes is automatically going to be better than Deron Bland just because he now has the coaches that Deron Bland had last year. But I do feel like coaching and scheme will fix a lot of what's wrong with Forbes last year. And then bringing in a guy like Cam Hart can only help with that. Even Darrell Green said sometime late last season that it was a coaching problem and that Emmanuel Forbes has a lot of talent and was basically like, hey man, hire me and I could get him right. But I think Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. can do that job very well for us. And of course, Jason Simmons as well. I really like Jason Simmons as our defensive passing game coordinator. But going back to Cam Hart, not only is he a really tall and long receiver, but he's also very athletic. He has a 9.82 out of 10 raw athletic score, which makes him the 42nd most athletic corner to enter the draft since 1987. That is insane, y'all. His 40 time of 4.5 flat was really good for somebody his size. And then his vertical of 39.5 and broad jump of 10 feet, 10 inches were both elite. So he's a very explosive player, and he's also very smooth in changing directions for a guy his size. And as a former receiver, he also has great ball skills. The only real issue I have with him is his ability to contribute against the run right now. That's it. But that's the same exact worry that Rivera had about Christian Gonzalez, which made us end up taking Emmanuel Forbes over Christian Gonzalez. And I refuse to believe that Adam Peters will make a similar mistake here. You pay corners to cover. That's what they do. Yeah, it would be nice if they can do some run stopping as well, but they get paid big munions to take elite receivers out of games, and that's the priority, and that's something Cam Hart has the potential to do. And luckily for him and us, he doesn't have to come in and start and lock up receivers day one. With how excited this defensive staff is about Emmanuel Forbes and Quan Martin, and with Benjamin St-Juste showing us that he can cover back in 2022, maybe we can get that version of him again. And with the signing of Michael Davis in free agency, who was quietly one of the best corners in the entire NFL in 2022, hopefully we can get that out of him as well. I think Cam Hart will not have to start day one. When you really think about it, if we could just take the 2022 version of Emmanuel Forbes in college, Benjamin St-Juste on the Commanders, and Michael Davis on the Chargers, we have an elite defensive back group, man. It's actually really crazy if we can get 2022 out of those guys. We'll see. But either way, I think even if we don't get that out of those guys, you still don't necessarily need Cam Hart to come in and start day one and be forced to learn on the job. I think you could just throw him in there as like a part of the rotation, allow him to gain his confidence and to allow the game to slow down over time for this guy. And for his comp, Charles Tillman, plain and simple, we can keep it pushing. I literally think he's Charles Tillman. And then round 3, 100th overall, I have us taking edge Jalyx Hunt out of Houston Christian. Is Jalyx, not exactly sure. Maybe I just need to call him Hunt for the remainder of this video until after we draft him. And this is one of the picks I'm probably the most confident in us getting. Just like how confident I was about us getting Quan Martin last year, even though I projected him to go in the 3rd round, I'm quite close to that, to the level with Jalyx Hunt, man. And I already did a super deep breakdown of Jalyx Hunt in my mock draft that I did earlier yesterday morning. So I'm not going to spend very long on him in this video, but again, long story short, just to go ahead and run it back and summarize real quick. First of all, to be an FCS player and to get brought in for a top 30 visit is already very significant. He has growing buzz around the NFL right now, and there's clear interest on the Commanders' end. Again, to bring him in for a top 30 visit, you're limited to how many of those you can have. You can only have 30. That's why it's called a top 30 visit. Out of all of these draft prospects, the hundreds of them, you're only allowed to have 30, and we decided to bring in Jalyx Hunt. And you know you are something special if you can make it to the Senior Bowl as a player from the FCS. A lot of FBS players who even play in the SEC and the Big Ten don't even make it to the Senior Bowl as seniors. This guy did as an FCS player. He went to the East-West Shrine Bowl and balled out so much that Jim Nagy was like, hey man, bring him to the Senior Bowl. His momentum right now is crazy, and I'm personally not taking any chance of waiting to see if he can make it in like our next pick, like the 5th round, 139th overall that we have. I feel like Adam Peters may not even take that chance as well. That's why I'm predicting us to, even if we have to take him a little too early, I can see us doing it. And we can get straight to his comp, because I feel like that's probably the best way to start his quick breakdown. And I think it's fairly realistic. Still a pretty hopeful reach. I'm going to still call it somewhat of a reach, but I comp him to Robert Mathis. Not only traits-wise, but also career path-wise as well. Because Robert Mathis also came out of the FCS as a late-round draft pick and had some run-stopping, edge-setting concerns at first coming out of college, and it also took him until like his 2nd year to become the Robert Mathis that we now know. And if you're willing to have Jalyx Hunt a part of like the rotation of edge rushers and let him have his biggest impact on special teams while he's a rookie, and you're willing to be patient with him his rookie season, then he could end up being a steal in the 3rd round. We could end up replacing the disappointing Chase Young with an edge rusher that could end up living up to the hype that we had for Chase Young with the same pick that we traded away Chase Young to get, which is really interesting. But with Jalyx, his ultimate ceiling, reach, and goal to me is Khalil Mack. Again, I want to emphasize reach, but based off of athletic profile and traits, there's a tiny bit of Khalil Mack potential in there, man. Jalyx is just slightly bigger, slightly faster, and slightly longer, and also just as explosive, but only slightly less agile. That's it. If, and of course it's a really big if, he could put it all together, he has a super hopeful reach of a ceiling of Khalil Mack. There just aren't a lot of humans that have the same athletic profile as a Khalil Mack. They just aren't made that often. That is very rare, and Jalyx has that at the very least. And with all of the edge rushers we brought in the free agency, we wouldn't have to rush his development. We can do exactly what the Colts did with Robert Mathis, have him as a rotational piece early on, and then expand his role over time as he becomes a more consistent edge setting run stopper on the edge. Because I believe year 1, with his athletic traits and a little refining, he could be an immediate impact player as a situational pass rusher. I'm seeing Jalyx's floor as basically like Giants edge rusher O'Shane Ximines, a guy that comes in on obvious passing downs and terrorizes tackles and quarterbacks. And as he starts to grow in as an edge setter, He grows, he'll probably grow in snaps, and then he'll grow in impact and stats. That's his path. Become a better edge setter, run stopper. You'll see an expanded role over time, and then you can slowly turn into Robert Mathis for what he did with the Colts. Then round 5, 139th overall, I was taking tight end Jared Wiley out of TCU. And this is another top 30 visit for the Washington Commanders. They also met with him at the Senior Bowl, at the NFL Combine, and even went to his Pro Day. I'm not exactly sure if they went specifically to the TCU Pro Day for Jared Wiley, but it's quite likely. And first of all, he's a red zone king. He led the entire FBS in red zone touchdown receptions this past season. Out of every tight end in all of college football, not only just in this draft class, but all of college football. And we need every bit of that on the Commanders, please. And he has a very high ceiling as well. He hasn't even scratched the surface of his ceiling, in my opinion. He's 6'6", 249 pounds, and somehow ran a 4.62 40 time. And his 37-inch vertical was elite, so he's fast and explosive, and he also has a really big catch radius, and probably the best thing about him is his hands. He only had one drop in his entire collegiate career. He's very dependable, literally as dependable as it gets when it comes to being like a safe target, a safety blanket for a young quarterback, most likely going to be like a Jayden Daniels. But now that takes me to his negatives, because yeah, he only had one drop his entire career, but he also didn't get thrown towards a lot. Like not a lot, quite a bit, but not a lot. So it's kind of, you can say that it's easier to have less drops when you're not getting targeted as much. And I'm not taking anything away from his hands, because again, he arguably has some of the best hands in this entire draft, and that's including wide receivers. But Jared Wiley had 47 catches for 520 yards and only had a total of 43 catches in all of his previous 4 seasons combined. So to put it in perspective, even with Lad McConkey and lots of other good receivers on the Georgia Bulldogs, Brock Bowers had 56 receptions in 2023, 9 more than Jared Wiley, and Brock Bowers played in 2.5 less games than Jared Wiley. And I'm hoping a lot of teams just take him off their draft boards just purely because of that, just because of production. I'm hoping. Also, he's not much of a yak guy, and he's also an inconsistent blocker right now. He's very willing and has very good hand placement, but once you ask him to hold on to blocks for extended periods of time, his lack of strength starts to show up a little bit, especially when blocking against edge rushers. He's great out in space blocking linebackers and DBs, but those edge rushers give him a little bit of a problem right now. But he has the frame to add more muscle and weight to fix that if you really feel that is necessary. But I'm not even necessarily sure if he really has to, because he has the potential to be a really good receiving tight end already. And watch out, because I've seen multiple people, including Jim Nagy himself, say that while talking to NFL teams, Jared Wiley is seen as a tier 2 tight end. Basically, it's Brock Bowers and his very own tier by himself, and then there's a group right under that that reportedly includes Jared Wiley. And then Tom Pelissero even went as high to say that Jared Wiley could literally be the second tight end drafted point blank period. Like, he's really rising up draft boards lately, and now I'm scared. But luckily, the betting odds as of right now say that Ben Sinnott has plus 160 odds to be the second tight end drafted. Jatavion Sanders is second at plus 175. Theo Johnson's plus 900. Cade Stover's plus 900. And then Jared Wiley's plus 1,000 to be the second tight end drafted. But we may have to take him in the second or third round at this point, sadly, just in case. But if he slides all the way down to the 5th round, you sprint to the podium to get him. You know why? Because his comp for me, and I feel like this is actually a pretty realistic comp as a ceiling, I think he's literally Hunter Henry. Like, literally healthy, prime Chargers version of Hunter Henry as a ceiling. I believe we can get that out of him as well. Now, round 5, 152nd overall, I was taking running back Isaiah Guerendo from Louisville. And I was really close to picking cornerback Elijah Jones here and just doubling down on corner in the first rounds, because I think he has a very high chance of being drafted by the Commanders. I really do. But at the same time, this 5th round is a really good sweet spot for running backs right now. Honestly, if I didn't want Jared Wiley so bad and felt like the Commanders are potentially very interested in him, I probably would have went Isaac with the previous pick earlier in the 5th round. But running backs right now, to maximize their value, I think the 5th round is their sweet spot as far as getting a really good guy but not having to take him too early. Also, I love Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler, and I think Chris Rodriguez has shown flashes as a bulldozer, but we need an electric pass-catching running back that can take it to the house any given play. Yes, Austin Eckler is our pass-catching running back right now, but first of all, he's slow, point blank period, no way around it, he's slow, and then secondly, he's only on a 1-year contract, so who knows if we even bring him back for the 2025 season. So I'm taking an electric running back in the 5th round in Isaac Guerendo right now. And this is the ball of clay that has the crazy high ceiling. This guy is the highest ceiling a ceiling could potentially be at a running back position, which is backed by his raw athletic score. He had a 9.99 out of 10 RAS. He's 6 foot tall, 221 pounds, and somehow ran a 4.33 40-yard dash and had a 41.5 vertical, y'all. That's ridiculous. But I'm fairly confident that he'll be available this late in the draft because he is lacking a lot of nuance. As far as like the actual running back position, he's lacking a lot there. Like if the NFL categorized people like how college categorizes high school recruits, you would really consider Isaac Guerendo more of like an athlete. He would just have that ATH next to him rather than an RB for running back, in my honest opinion. His vision is inconsistent. He's strong, but his pass protection technique is bad right now, but there's potential there. A lot of running backs just purely lack the strength. He has the strength. We just need to work on that technique. And then he also bounces runs to the outside too often. He's always trying to make a big play instead of taking what the defense gives him in between the tackles. And he also needs to get better with his cuts and being more decisive with his cuts. But literally everything that I just listed as a negative is very coachable. And with Anthony Lynn here, I have a lot of confidence in this coaching staff's ability to get closer to Isaac ceiling, if anything. He already has all of the things that you can't coach, so just draft him and coach him up, and you get paid millions of dollars to do it. This is the type of guy that you get paid millions of dollars to get the ceiling out of. I think this guy could be our good karma for real for how our Bryce Young experiment failed so terribly. I think this is our good karma to come back to help us out. He may not necessarily be a 3-down back his rookie season just yet, but he has a crazy high ceiling. His athletic profile is actually literally my biggest reach of all reaches comp, Edgerrin James. But Isaac is even heavier and even faster. We'll see if he could ever even think about reaching that ceiling. I wouldn't put any money on it at all. But humans that have Edgerrin James athletic profiles just don't come around often at all. That is a very rare specimen. And if you can somehow find a way to turn him into a nuanced route runner with vision, and he can literally become a higher ceiling prime Austin Eckler, in my opinion, because he's far more athletic than Austin Eckler ever could dream of being. So if you can get him to become a little bit more nuanced vision, all of that type of stuff, pass protection, whoo, it could get real serious with Isaac, man. It really could. And then lastly, round 7, 222nd overall, I have us taking offensive tackle Anim Dankwah originally from Ghana, then Toronto, and then he came to America to go to Howard University. Yes, sir. Shouts out to him. He's a native of Brampton, Ontario, technically, even though he's originally from Ghana. Measured in at 6'8" and 353 pounds with an 85.5-inch wingspan. 35 1/8 inch arms and 9 3/4 inch hands, bruh. Crazy. And he was nearly 10 pounds heavier than the next closest offensive lineman out of the entire combine, while also being one of the 6 tallest players in attendance as well. Only defensive tackle T'Vondre Sweat of Texas was heavier at 366 pounds at the combine. And he somehow had a 27.5-inch vertical at the combine at that ridiculous weight. Somehow, with all of that weight, his legs were able to jump a 27.5-inch vert. That is crazy. Just to put it in perspective, Joe Alt is 321 pounds and had a 9.92 raw athletic score. Elite athleticism. And he had a 28-inch vertical while weighing a whole 32 less pounds than our guy Anim Dankwah. Also, Dankwah has spent the last 5 seasons at Howard University in Washington, D.C., appearing in 39 games and establishing himself as a 3-year starter at left tackle. In 11 games as a senior, he allowed a career-low 11 pressures and only 2 sacks while anchoring an offense that averaged nearly 384 yards per game. As a result, he was named first-team All-Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference this year, building off of a second-team selection last season. And he has a super high ceiling, y'all. He's a built-in-the-lab type of guy. But of course, he's very, very raw coming from Howard University. And we may have gotten lucky because this guy doesn't seem to be on a lot of people's radars because he played at Howard. But luckily for us, we are the Washington Commanders, so he's been playing in the local area for the past few years, and we somehow caught wind of him. And with his crazy high ceiling, you may not even want to wait to see if he can make it as an undrafted free agent, because there's reports from Dane Bugler himself and Justin M. _NFL and a few others that are saying that he's projected to potentially be a 7th round pick, or at worst, a priority undrafted free agent. Sports Illustrated even thinks that he could go as early as the 6th round. So maybe there are more people aware of him than I think. Hopefully not. But you have to take him in the 7th round before other teams have a chance to steal him away as an undrafted free agent and offer him more money or more playing time, whatever, and try to sell him on it. And there's clear interest from the Commanders, luckily. I mean, not only was he at the Commanders' local pro day a couple of weeks ago, but it's also reported that the Commanders had dinner with the guy. And that's big time. That's not a common thing. He may not even be playable for a year or two, but I'm telling you, when he gets it, if he ever gets it, he could end up being a huge steal in the 7th round for us. And why not bring in a tackle with a really high ceiling when we already have a solid floor but terribly low ceiling Andrew Wiley starting at right tackle for us right now? Now his comp, hard to say with how raw he is right now. It's really hard to get a feel for exactly what type of player he'll be. But with him being just a huge human being, a really big offensive tackle, I'd say probably Cornelius Lucas with an even higher ceiling. And before we get up out of here, I have a few undrafted free agents that I'm trying to predict for the Commanders to go and get after the draft ends. I have the Commanders going to get Richard Jubinar out of Troy, the linebacker, because there is reported interest in the guy from my dog Ken Johannesson at Burgundy Burner on Twitter. So if he goes undrafted, don't be surprised if we go and get linebacker Richard Jubinar outside of Troy after the draft is over. And also be on the lookout for cornerback Benny Bishop Jr. out of West Virginia, who runs a 4.39 because the Commanders brought him in for a top 30 visit. So stay tuned for that. Also, cornerback Rod Gaddison from a small school of Western Carolina. Strong possibility. Keep a lookout for his name. And if the edge rusher Javonte Bean-Baptiste from Notre Dame that I briefly mentioned earlier goes undrafted, I'm expecting him to be one of the priorities immediately after the draft for them to go and sign. And I'm also expecting them to go and get linebacker Tyrese Knight out of UTEP after the draft as well. And so those are my 5 undrafted free agent predictions right there. I'm expecting us to bring in more than that, of course, but those are the 5 that I'd be surprised if we didn't go sign after the draft if they go undrafted. Maybe some of those guys go 6th or 7th round, you never know, but if all 5 of those guys go undrafted, I would firmly expect us to at the very least be pursuing those guys, and I would be surprised if we didn't at least sign 3 of them. Now, also, before we get up out of here, lastly, I predict that they will go and get Justin Simmons, and I'm dead serious. The all-pro safety Justin Simmons, formerly on the Denver Broncos, who's still a free agent right now, and I have 4 reasons as to why this makes too much sense. Number 1, we still don't have a true veteran in the safety room right now. And by the free agency moves the Commanders made this offseason, they clearly at least want to compete this year. It may not be to the extent of like mortgaging the future for more immediate success, like sacrificing future success for sooner success, but they definitely want to at least compete for the playoffs in year 1 of our rebuild. Otherwise, why sign so many veterans to 1-year contracts rather than just throwing a bunch of young guys out there and just let them learn on the fly, accelerate their development, and let them learn on the job, and maybe it will pay off you know, later on down the road, they'll be better because of it. But maybe year one, we go out there, make a lot of mistakes and lose games because of it. And so Justin Simmons immediately makes our defense way better than what it already is right now, especially in that safety room. Number two, he's a perfect fit for Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr.'s defense. Those two created and coached the NFL's best takeaway defense for the past 3 years in the Dallas Cowboys, and Justin Simmons leads the NFL in interceptions since being drafted in 2016. There's not a more perfect match than that in free agency, I feel like. I mean, that's as good as it gets. Number three, speaking of drafting, Adam Peters himself literally drafted Justin Simmons when he was in Denver as one of their top draft guys. So if Adam Peters loved Justin Simmons coming out of college, imagine how he feels about him as multiple all-pro selections later. And then lastly, number four, we have the second most cap space in the NFL. If his primary factor in wherever he ends up signing as a free agent after the draft is money, which I doubt it kind of is, but maybe it is somewhat a part of the equation, then we have that going in our favor as well. The only team with more cap space than us right now is the New England Patriots, and we are easily the better team and more ready to win right now than them. So it even makes more sense for him to pick us over them, especially when you look at the divisions our teams are in as well. Like the Commanders, though not likely have a chance to pull the 2023 Houston Texans, the Patriots will be lucky to win 6 games this season in the division they're in right now. So with those 4 big points in our favor, I also hope and predict that the Commanders will go and sign all-pro safety Justin Simmons after the draft. It makes too much sense. We have a need. He needs a team. Adam Peters, our general manager, drafted him. He's a perfect fit for what Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. want to do schematically. We need a veteran, specifically, not only just talent, but we need a veteran leader in our safety group. It just makes too much sense. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please still farm that like button, still farm the subscription button, and still farm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you still follow that like button. Stay tuned. I got you updated on everything draft. I'm not wearing this for no reason, y'all. I'm coming to y'all with breakdowns for every pick, and on top of that, film sessions for every draft pick as well. I'm super excited. Make sure you stay tuned. Of course, let me know in the comment section how you feel about my mock draft. Agree or disagree with any of my points, and provide your reasonings as to why. And of course, put your final predictive mock drafts in the comment section as well. Not what you want the Commanders to do, not what you think they should do, but predict what you think they will do in the comment section. We're going to use this video in this comment section basically as a comment board for everybody to refer to be able to basically brag off of how right you were about what the Commanders were going to do. So use this video as that. And of course, man, I really appreciate y'all. Again, stay tuned. I'm live streaming rounds 1 through 5 Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at the very least, and I'm gonna have breakdowns for every pick that we make. And on Sunday, maybe latest Monday, I'm gonna do another call-in live show for y'all to call in, voice your opinions about how our draft went, which picks you like the most, which picks you like the least, all of that type of stuff. Let me know how you feel about the draft just as a whole and everything. So make sure you stay tuned. I really appreciate y'all. I'm gonna catch y'all later. Pull up at 7 p.m. this evening. Let's get it.